Ladies, I'm going to show you how to do a dry point etching. The first thing we're going to need is what's called a sheet of acetate. It's plastic and you can buy different thicknesses. So the one we've got here is about a 3mm acetate. Then what we're going to do is, we don't need that bigger sheet because we're going to put ours into our booklets. So I've already cut it in half and I'll show you again how to do that. Okay, so I'm taking a steel rule and I'm just going to mark on that measurement. So that's 21, which is 10.5. Now I'm not going to cut all your acetate for you. You can have a go at that. I'm going to take a sharp knife and be careful my fingers are out of the way. Now this is the same as the lino. It doesn't like to be pushed and pulled too much. So just going steady bit by bit to get your cut. You can feel that's nearly done. Just check. Give it a little bit of helping hand and then we've got our pieces. Now the next thing you can do is, if you have, let's go back around. If you have an image, you can take your piece of acetate and you can actually stick your photo underneath. So you can set it to the same size. If you want to make it bigger, your piece, and change your composition, you can make your photo larger and then it's the same thing, you can stick it on. Once you have your image stuck underneath it, get a piece of tape or something so it holds. You grab an etching tool and you just scratch into the surface. It's like when you're doing a line drawing, you're drawing with a pin, and it's the same thing. You need to value your line work. So your contour lines, your hatching and your cross hatching and your mark making to get to where you want to go. So you can see this student has gone around theirs. Now they've got a little bit bored, I'd say, so they got a little bit excited with that and overdid that sort of section. And then there's another one. So this one has a little bit more thought into their hatching, included a little bit of atmospheric look with their mark making to do their print. Now, if you want it darker, you need to make your lines denser and make them closer together. It's not so much about digging in deeper, but it's very much about your mark making. What tends to happen with students is when they're working, you start off here, but by the time you're done, your head comes closer and closer. You're actually scratching out a plastic. So you've got to make sure that your eyes are safe. So just not putting your head so far down that you're going to get plastic in your eyes. Okay, so it's quite simple, but it does take a little bit of work. Can you hear that? So that's that little scratching away, and you can feel that to work out. And you can keep going with that. Now this one's already done. So the next one I'm going to show you is the printing process. And what I'm going to do is try and show you so that when you are at home, that you can still do it on your own with the things that you have. Okay, so what I was saying was we're going to use an AKUA ink, which is a little bit oilier than the block printing ink that we were using. And the process is different as well. What we're going to do is, I'm just going to use a kitchen knife. Now, if you use stuff from out of the kitchen, you need to make sure it's cleaned properly and all that sort of thing. Okay, then you're wiping the paint, the ink, I should say, into the surfaces where you want it to go. So the dry point etching was, we were cutting out our areas that we didn't want to print. In this one, you're actually cutting out the areas you do want to print. Checking. Okay, I'll leave that to the side. You can see I've got newspaper down. Now, traditionally you would make what's called dorkers, and they're out of fabric. They're like cloths. You just use them to clean up your net. But don't have those, and it's time consuming to make them as well. So we're going to make our own dorkers with what we have at home, which would be newspapers. Okay, so we've wiped the ink on as best we can. Now I tend to put the ink on where I want it to go. If you spread it over the whole plate, you're wasting your ink, and then you've got to get it off as well. So don't do that. Now, you've got to find a balance between wiping too much ink off and not leaving too much on. So the idea is that you are putting or pushing the ink down into the grooves that you've created. I've always used the circular sort of turn just to help it stay in and maybe not wipe too much off. Normally I would have had 20 of these ready to go, but isn't that organised? You can see the picture starting to come out now. And you've got to find a balance between not wiping too much ink off, not letting the ink dry, having your paper ready. So I've actually got the paper ready on the sink on the other side, so we can keep going. That's starting to come out more. And now what I'm going to do is have a look at those areas that I just have got too much ink on without but you'll be able to do this at home. Okay, I think that's pretty good. Okay, you can see we've got our little ink plate inked up, ready to go. So what I'm going to do with this is I've got a piece of 135 GSM paper, and you know already that you can play with different weighted paper and different surfaces to investigate. So I've just got a spray bottle with water, and I'm going to spray my water. But when I do that, can you see how it's a bit spotty? And if you're after that effect, that's fine. Like if you're doing something with a shell or the ocean, that can look quite nice. Then I'm going to take a clean sponge as best as you can in the art room, and I'm going to smooth out that water so I get rid of all the spots. Then I'm going to take my plate and put that on. I'm already trying to consider its presentation. And if you had a roller, you can use a roller. You can press it down if you want, but there's nothing wrong with getting a teaspoon and just going over your print. Oh, I think I left too much ink on, but never mind. Done it once. I'm just going to do it again. And there we have, you ready? Dun, da, da, da. Oh! Okay, now if you're looking at that technically as a print, these sort of marks on here, I didn't wipe enough ink off. But it's actually sort of a mid-90 sort of scene. So you could actually use that to say be a part of creating that sort of an atmospheric look. Does that make sense? And that's your, now washing, you should wash this straight away. If you're going to do another print, you can still do that. But if you let this dry, yeah, it's not real good. So I would encourage you to wash it. Now, because I did this once, you might be tempted to use a scrubbing brush. Don't, because you could end up scratching the actual surface that you're printing on. Okay.